Shot, Steel and Stone, which you will have bought either from Amazon somewhere around the world or perhaps downloaded from my PayHip site or Wargame Vault or even Wargames Atlantic. Also, if you've got the rules, you'll see that there's a link in there to download some free play sheets, basically condensing the rules onto just a few sides of paper, and that also includes all the extra colonial rules. Okay, so what have we got here? I thought the best way to demonstrate the rules would be to play through, at least part way, a small scenario. And this scenario I've set up in honour of the late Charles Grant and his, still with us, son Charles Stuart Grant, from whom I recently acquired this veteran unit of plastic 30mm Spencer Smith figures, the Ostergotland Regiment, which I did a video about recently, showing how I restored them, because they're very, very old. They date back to the mid-late 1960s, and plastic of that age can become brittle and very difficult. So I did a video about how I restored them, having acquired them from the Grant collection. So also in honour of this book, which was the book that got me into the hobby of wargaming in the first place, The War Game by Charles Grant, first published in 1971. And in fact, this scenario comes from the book. Starting on page 79, there was a description of a little battle called Action, which he used to describe his rules, and I thought, well, that's a nice idea, isn't it, to use that very scenario to represent my own rules, as thanks to the Grant family really for having got me into the hobby. The difference is, however, the Grant's War Games table was a massive 9 feet by 7 feet. Don't know how they reached the middle, don't ask me. I did a little poll on Twitter asking people, okay, if I'm going to be doing these demonstration videos, what size table would be representative of the kind of table that either you've got at home or you've got easy access to at the club? And overwhelmingly, the majority of answers, between 70 and 80%, I think, came back saying 6 foot by 4 foot, please. So on top of my 8 foot by 6 foot table up here in what's affectionately known as the Luftwaffe, my studio workroom, what we have is a 6 foot by 4 foot mat, and it's just a standard battle mat. This is from Deep Cut Studios, and it represents grassland, moorland, that kind of thing. Basically flat terrain that won't cause anyone any problems. So what other terrain have we got in the scenario? Well, the first thing is I've added, compared to the original scenario in Charles Grant's book, I've added a couple of low hills, one over there and a couple over here, just to potentially show the effect of higher ground on line of sight movement, that kind of thing. The other thing that I've got, the most prominent feature, is the roads, okay, forming a crossroads. These are just roads that I made myself out of slices of carpet tile painted up with household emulsion, the kind of thing you can do at home very quickly and at very low cost. Now, they're just country roads. We're not talking about motorways here, okay, they're just country roads, but they will give a benefit to any unit that moves along the road, whereas a unit crossing the road just from side to side gets no benefit whatsoever, and who wants to do that kind of tiny calculation anyway? What else have we got? We've got some areas of woodland. So these are just standard, the kind of trees you can buy at wargame shows or on eBay, that kind of stuff, mounted on old CDs I used to use to back up my graphic design work. How long ago was that now that we were sitting at our computers burning CDs to back stuff up before the advent of the cloud? So those represent areas of woodland that are difficult ground for any troops moving through them, other than, of course, light troops like chasseurs or Jaeger and light infantry, that kind of thing. You could, of course, if you wanted to, indicate the precise outline of the woods using some coloured felt or coloured cloth placed underneath. But I think it's fair to say that for most of us, certainly if we're playing solo or with a trusted opponent, we're not so bothered, and we're very honest about when a unit would be impeded by the woods or would benefit from being in cover in the woods. It's fairly obvious, and we'll look at that as we go along. So there's some areas of woodland here, a couple of bits over there, a couple of bits here, and on the side of the table closest to you there's fairly extensive woodland, and that woodland is alongside some areas of ponds and marsh and that kind of stuff, which represents impassable terrain. There are little gaps in between where I don't think it will happen in this scenario, but it would be possible probably for light troops to squeeze their way through, little pathways, that kind of stuff. But basically that represents impassable terrain. We've got no aquatic troops here today. What else have we got? We've got a couple of enclosures. These are stone built enclosures, the kind of things that you keep sheep or cattle in, that kind of thing, to protect them. Now what the grants didn't do was put any gateways in their scenario. I thought it would be a good idea, so there's at each corner on both enclosures there's a little gateway, so troops that are in a narrow column of march, that kind of thing, or a single base width, would be able to get through without being impeded, whereas any troops having to cross the walls obviously will suffer deduction in movement, whilst also of course they'd want to be inside the enclosure potentially to gain benefit from the hard cover that they afford. Okay, so that's the terrain, really simple, nothing that's going to tax the brain too much, and we'll look at that in more detail as it becomes relevant during the game. The only other thing is there's a few sort of decorative trees here that you could say are very small copses, so troops would have to veer around them, but they don't really give any additional cover or cause any further impediment to movement. That's just a bit of extra scenery, as it were. Now let's have a little look at the troops themselves, because the two sides are almost but not quite identical. On this side we have my favourite imagination, of course, it's Prunkland, and we've got a couple of regiments of musketeers, we've got a regiment of cuirassiers, we've got a regiment of Jäger in grey, and we've got a medium field gun which is currently limbered up. On this side we have Borgenmark, affectionately known as, of course, the Borg, and they're in blue, and we again have a couple of regiments of musketeers, a regiment of dragoons, a howitzer unit which is already unlimbered and ready to fire, and a small unit of Jäger over here. There are some differences. These Jäger are armed with muskets. The Prunkland Jäger are armed with rifles, and also you can see perhaps the chaps in grey over there, they've got long sticks. They're known as Schreinsfeder, and they were used for as a musket rest effectively, but also for fending off cavalry if they were foolish enough to get caught in the open. I've no idea how effective they were. My research hasn't found any instances of them using Schreinsfeder in anger, as it were, against the enemy, but someone may turn up something and contact me and say, aha, there's this account here. But anyway, it gives them a little bit of extra protection against cavalry, because of course they probably wouldn't have had bayonets, but they have got their little hanger swords, but that's getting into too much detail. What else do I want to point out here? The units of infantry on both sides. There are two sizes of unit. The Ostergotland regiment here and the von Eintopf regiment over there, they are 48-man units plus the command stand. They're big, large units. The other units over here, the Westergotland and von Renscher, they are normal size units, 36 figures plus command. You may already be saying, Henry, they all sound like very big units to me. My collection doesn't have units of that size. That's fair enough. And this is where, with a set of rules like mine or any set of rules, you have options. Here, simple option. Here's the Osnabrück Regiment, 48 men plus the command stand in the middle. Okay, if I just shuffle that along a bit, take out the command stand, we now have 2 units of 24 figures. That's fine. You may decide that you want your units to be 24 figures or 18 figures or 30 figures. Okay, whatever you like. Okay. The decision you have to make when you do that is, are you saying that this might be a conflict like, say, the American War of Independence, where unit sizes were relatively small, but you'd keep all the ranges and everything else the same, so you would classify them then as small units. Okay, not very small. Perhaps once they've fallen down to 18 figures or below, that might be classified as very small, but or tiny. But basically, that could be your standard unit size and keep everything else the same. Alternatively, if you want them to represent a unit that is still 600 men or thereabouts, 800 men, you could halve all the ranges and move distances. Okay. And obviously that would mean you could pack a lot more units into the same space. And I'm not even addressing here if you decide to go down to 15mm size miniatures or 12 or 10 or 6s or even now say 2 or 3mm miniatures. Obviously there are many options, and it's entirely up to you how you play it. So you could say, right, that's actually 2 battalions, let's say, as opposed to a single one, and they're of 24 figures. If you like having a command figure still with flags and officers and drummers, well, I'd like to have them separately like this, but this goes back to, I had a love of the look of games at the War Games Holiday Centre run by Peter Gilder. Some of you may remember that. And he used a set of rules called In the Grand Manner, and he mounted his officers and drummers and flags on separate bases like that, and I just love the look of it, right? It can cause complications. You can ask, well, do they get involved in combat? Do they count as sort of active, or do I kind of ignore them in combat? We'll address that later on. It's entirely up to you is the answer. I'm not going to dictate what you do. I just think it looks pretty to have separate command stands with 2. Prunkland has 2 flags per command stand, but it's entirely up to you. So, as I say, it's up to you. This is the big old school look of game. It's just something that I fell in love with a long time ago, but you might like something slightly different. So both these could be, say that could be 2 units of 24 and 2 units of 18, for example. Either way, in this game, as you'll see in the rules, I'm classifying that as a large unit and that as a normal size unit. And similarly over here, a large unit and a standard size unit. Okay? When it comes to the cavalry, obviously what you can see is I've left a gap between the squadrons, and that's because in reality squadrons operated independently rather than as a big chunk phalanx of cavalry moving around the battlefield. What else have we got? Okay, we've got some command figures here, and we've got the general with his ADC, the commander-in-chief, and 2 brigadiers on each side. Okay, and in the next video we're going to go into the leadership and command and control aspects of the game, so you'll be able to understand what is going on there. The artillery on both sides, howitzer and medium field gun, you'll see that the number of gunner figures is a useful reminder of how many dice you'll roll when firing that gun. These are obviously just small batteries, that you could have a battery with multiple cannon in, each cannon representing probably 2 in reality. But in this instance, it's just a small encounter and 1 is more than enough. Something else you'll see me using during the game are things like this. Now, you might, oh my goodness me, is that a bounce stick, Henry? It's not. It's just a range stick. I just find it useful for each type of artillery, and I've got it for the medium artillery and so on and so forth. I just have a stick marked with, you know, point blank range, normal range and long range, with the factors marked on it as an instant reference. Obviously there's nothing wrong with a good old-fashioned tape measure. I happen to have marked mine, I don't know if you can see, with base widths, just with a marker pen. So every 60 millimeter there's a base width marker. But I just love the look of the good old range stick. But it's not a bounce stick. It's not like Charles Grant's original rules where you were rolling to see where along that stick the thing would actually bounce and potentially inflict casualties. But it's a useful aide-memoire as well, and I'll put that out to the side, out of the way for the moment, though it will see action, that's for sure. Okay, what else have I got? You'll see I've got this set up here, so that when I roll dice, because if I would just roll the dice like that, you can't see that, Henry. Okay, so what I've done, I've rigged up a little thing here so that when I need to roll some dice, an opposed dice roll or any kind of dice roll, it's pointed at my dice tray so that you'll be able to see what I've rolled. And quite simply, I just press the record button, and here we go. There's the dice, and you can see what the rolls come out as. Okay, so that's enough for now. I'll be coming back next time. We'll actually be starting and playing through the game, beginning with obviously the command and control aspects, which can bring in some discussion of adding personality to commanders as well, something I talked about in my books, the Wargaming Compendium and Wargaming Campaigns, because quite a lot of people seem very interested in that sort of thing, which is great. And of course it's something you can do really easily, particularly if you're a solo wargamer. That's no doubt going to be something you'll be interested in. So thanks for watching this first little video, and I'll be back again soon with the opening of the action.